Alright, so I'm just going to go through really quick and add in a image plane with this dude. So normally when you're doing this, you would actually have orthographics of, like, ideally the front and side of your character's head. In this case, just for warning you, whatever I end up with is not going to look anything at all like this dude. I can model a head in maybe like 2 hours it looks like him, but not in 15 minutes. And I'm just gonna turn on my grid again and just, oh, okay, that actually lines up pretty darn well. So I'm just gonna, you know, same as like you normally do with orthographics, we're just sort of like line up the head with, you know, the center of your plane. Alright. So for grins, and again, this is gonna be like completely horrific looking. So I'm just going to kind of go through, like, more or less how I would make a head, or at least how I would start making a head. And I'll give you a hint. It starts with a cube, because cubes are magical. So I'm just going to chuck in a cube in here. I will center this, because I do want it to be... I want to use... If I'm modeling a head, I want to use symmetry, at least for, like, the start of the head. And then I'm just going to add a single subdivision to pretty much each side of my cube. So I end up with something that looks like this. And I'm literally going to start a timer to see how much I get done. Alright, so I'm going to grab my cube, and I'm going to throw it up somewhere kind of over his head. I also might, you know, scale it a little bit so that it actually vaguely resembles the size of his head. So usually the first thing I'll do when I'm modeling a face is, with this cube... Ooh, I have symmetry on the wrong axis turned on? I do. Alright, so this is apparently I want symmetry object X for it. So if I select, you know, the left side of his face, I want to do the right side, so the back of his head. So I'm just going to grab these faces here, and I'll just kind of push them in a little bit so that I'm making something that's slightly more cylindrical, but with quads on the top. And the first thing I usually start with is the eyes, because, like, I don't know, it's such a focal point of the face, kind of makes sense to me. So I'm going to take that one little loop I have and just move it up to more or less the center line of his eyeballs. And then throw in one more edge loop sort of above his, like, eyebrow area and somewhere in the middle-ish of his nose-ish. You don't need to be super precise. And then I will also throw in a loop sort of in the center of his eye. So you can see that I have something, I mean, this is like pretty much what I have at this point. I'm going to go in and start shaping some of these vertices and just sort of dragging them around so that I basically, what I want to end up with is effectively a little, like, kind of a raccoon mask, actually, going around the bottom and tops of his eyeballs. So you can see here, like, it's pretty much, it is just like a weird little raccoony kind of mask deal. And the fact that I've done, you know, a little bit of shaping on his head means I have to do a little bit less shaping later, kind of. But anywho, so what I'm going to do is just grab all of the little faces of this raccoon mask and extrude them in. That is not what I wanted. And extrude them in like this. So you have, like, pretty much another, I guess, mask within a mask within a mask. Has anyone actually seen Princess Bride here? Okay, thank God. Alright, but that was my reference. Okay, so basically what you should have now is this little loop of edges that's pretty much like tracing around the outside of the eyes, if that makes sense. And then I'm going to go in and just really quick do a tiny bit of shaping on the top of the head so that it doesn't look like a box, because this is not what heads look like, I hope. The last one I did this in, or like for my last class, I pretty much ended up modeling like paper bag head guy, and it was so terrifying. I mean, this is still going to be terrifying when I'm done with it, but hopefully the fact that I have already done a head in like 15 minutes will make it slightly less creepy. So you can see, again, still really creepy face. What I'm going to do is throw in another loop, and basically this is going to help define like where the bridge of his nose is. So just throw that in there, and then I'm going to murder his eye faces, or his eye planes. And just ignore the fact that I'm deleting stuff on the back of my model. So, So okay, now we pretty much have like little holes for the eyes. This is usually the part where I would actually go in and like add eyeballs. So it is a really good idea, in my opinion, to go in and throw in like, you know, pretty much at this point, like when you're actually starting to do like quote unquote real shaping on the eye, put in a sphere so that you can actually model around it. Because it does help. It does suck if you like get done and you're like, oh my god, like I had this beautiful face and it's like perfect, and then it doesn't fit a sphere eyeball. There's nothing worse than that. So at this point, what I'm going to do is just grab, and again, if you guys have questions about what I'm doing, just sort of stop me, is totally fine. And I'm going to go in and just sort of position these little, his like eye hole to make it more eye-shaped. So I'm just lining these up with pretty much wherever his eyelids are. If you were doing this for animation, one thing that you actually do that's a little bit different than just making a straight model is you'd actually model the eyes like half closed, because by the time, what have I done here? Oh no, I meant to do another extrude. Cough. Alright, that was dumb. Alright, so I'm going to extrude this, and then I'm going to shape it. Cough. Alright. But one thing you'll usually do if you're doing this for animation is you'll model the eyes like either mostly closed or all the way closed, because if you have the character blink, it's actually going to avoid a lot of texture stretching. So if you model the eyes open and then like basically shift all of the geometry of the eyeball down, it's going to cause massive texture stretching all over their eyelid, which is usually, again, why you model them closed. So at this point, I'm going to go through and kind of be like, well, this is not sitting where it should be on the face at all. And I'm just going to grab all of these like weird little sort of eye silhouettes, I guess, and just drag them in so that they sit more closely on that actual eyeball that I've thrown in there. And this is, again, why it's really good to add in at least one eyeball as you're doing this, because it does. I found, like, you end up pushing this like inner eye area by the nose in way farther than you would normally expect, but it, like, by the time you're done, it makes sense like that. It's just like kind of like counterintuitive seeming to do that sometimes. So you can see already we have like a little sort of masky shape for the face. If I smooth it, it doesn't look like completely horrific. And like I said, it's still gonna be really wonky looking. So the next thing I usually end up doing is just like blocking in a quick mouth. Wow, not what I wanted. All right, so I'm just gonna go and insert another edge loop tool. And I'm going to pick a place between, the projectors went out. All right, I'm actually gonna do this. And I'm hitting spacebar to access this menu. Don't give me that. Oh, whoops, I want front. Fun view. All right. And I'm just gonna turn off my, I'm just hitting spacebar to access these menus. Where am I going? Handles, all right. So I'm gonna throw in a little mouth. So for the mouth, it's basically gonna be, you kind of gotta like throw in a loop like halfway through the nose, and then even if you're doing organic modeling, like same thing if you have, you know, a hard edge in like a power tool or whatever that you're making. So like this little line that goes along the side of the face, I think it's called the nasolabial fold, unless I'm going crazy. But like you would need edge loops that kind of follow that line basically. So what I'm going to do is throw in another loop, same way that I did with the eyes, where I like pretty much put a loop straight through his mouth, or through his eyeball. I'm going to put one like pretty much where his lips meet. I also might at this point, you know, maybe stretch that slightly. And then maybe do something, I'll like grab this bottom thing and be like, cool, maybe this looks slightly chinnier or something. And again, it's sort of very slowly and awkwardly becoming something that resembles a face. Push that in a little bit. You can see it's like, it's kind of facey. Looks kind of like a face. So again, to get the actual mouth in there, what I'm going to do is grab these like little faces right here, pretty much maybe the faces you would expect to not be there if this was like some kind of medieval helmet or something like that. I'm going to grab those guys and I am going to extrude them. and then just smush them down. So you have, I don't even know what to equate this to, but just some weird little extruded shape. And then I'm actually just going to delete those faces. So basically what you have now is this gaping hole for a mouth. And at this point it becomes a lot easier to see like what I actually need to do to this face. So I need to, like, if this is the corner, the edge of his mouth, I'm going to take this and drag it over to the actual edge of his mouth. And you can see that when I do that, it starts to sort of line up this little, like if I shift that vert over a tiny bit, this line here pretty much follows that little nasolabial fold, like the thing that creases when you smile. So with that being done, I'm going to just sort of go through and position the rest of these vertices to look something hopefully more like a mouth. Oh god, that's not better. And I might also go through, so it's also not a horrible idea to put in teeth when you're modeling, because it does help you sort of shape the mouth area. I'm going to kind of go through and like really, really crudely block in this mouth, maybe make it look kind of, I was going to say more mouthy, and then I looked at it and I'm like, nope, that's not what I'm doing. But yeah, so just kind of like keep going in, keep shaping stuff. Half of organic modeling is literally just sitting there for hours, like pushing vertices around and making them look not completely horrifying. But I mean, you can see, maybe, sort of, that it's like beginning to resemble something kind of, maybe that looks more like a face. I'll like pull this out, make his chin a little bit wider. I mean, he kind of looks like creepy, like monkey face, but it's kind of getting there, sort of, maybe. So again, as I do pretty much anything, I'm just going through and being like, okay, is there anything that like looks really weird shape-wise? Like, do I need to push his cheeks out? Because it's way easier to edit the overall shape of his head when there's like 6 polys there than when you have, you know, 40 polys defining a super nice mouth. So in this case, I'm just gonna be like, cool, close enough, and keep going. So any questions on what I've done so far? Right. This looks like something from a movie, I just can't remember what. But anywho, so the next thing I usually do for the mouth at least is go in and I will insert another edge loop on the outside of the mouth. And I'm going to use that to kind of define where his apparently super tiny lips are. What? Yeah, no, that's actually probably what I was thinking of. Alright. If you guys want to get like a good laugh about weird, like what the face looks like, my last class was just like riffing on the face the whole time. We're like, this is like a Voldemort paper bag, baby. Like, what is it? It was so ridiculous. Feel free to insult this model as we go. But yeah, so again, I'm just kind of like adding some more loops, helping to block in like the very overall shape of the lips. And I'm not pretending this is like super crazy pretty, but it's kind of, it could be something soon-ish, maybe. So at this point, like maybe it seems like it might not be a completely horrendous idea to like give him more of a nose. And usually for noses, there's like different schools of thought, I guess, about how to make noses. Me personally, I'll usually go in and just like throw in like 2 edge loops relatively like within this little shape I've created here. And you can see that, again, these are pretty much following that little nasolabial fold on the side of his mouth. This is more important if you're doing animation. If you just need something to look like a face, it kind of doesn't matter. But this is like set up specifically so that like if you pull his mouth to the side, like this will deform properly and behave more like skin. So now what I can do is grab these very awkward little nose faces and be like, hey, what if I extrude you awkwardly? And now he has kind of more like a nose blob. And then I'm kind of like, I'm feeling like I need a little more geometry like right on the sides of the nose and here to really like push the bridge of his nose out. So I just threw in one more edge loop, and that'll also help a little bit with the lips. So I'm just gonna grab these and be like, ah ha ha, nose. And you can see that even that like does look significantly more nosy than it did like 10 seconds ago. So this is a bit again where like I like having eyeballs in there because it does help like especially with this area, I find I always push it in like far more than I expect to, but then it ends up looking like the sort of more pushed in, it ends up looking more natural. And without eyes, I would never move them in that far because it just seems ridiculous to me. But anywho, so I'm going to go through with my nose, just grab these little faces here, pretty much the ones that are like, for that like original loop I added for defining the nose size, I'll just grab any little faces within that, take them, and extrude them out a few times. Cool. So it was like 2 extrudes, and now he's like a demon Grinch character. At which point you can actually go through and do even more refining on the shape of the nose so it looks way less horrid than this. And you can see that now it's like, not instant nose, but it's like way better nose than it was like 2 seconds ago. I mean, this is, wow, alright. I put that in like the super wrong spot. Alright, whatever. You get the point. But now I've been harping on about this like nasolabial fold bit, but because I have the topology running in there, I can pretty much grab those faces and just push them back slightly, and you can see that it pretty much automatically gets in that fold into the face. Which is why I just think it's really easy to, like, if you see a major crinkle on the face, to like throw in some geometry to help show that off. And that is apparently what I can get done in 15 minutes while also dictating what I'm doing. Got farther my last one. So do you guys, it's just like, I do want to go over a little bit about like smoothing the lower part of the nose here, but is this something you guys would be interested in kind of like seeing more of, or would you rather move on to like weaponry or something else?
I'd be interested in seeing more.
Cool. Thank you for opinions. Yeah, alright, cool. So I'm just gonna, just really quick, just chuck in some nostrils on this, because it's super creepy the way it is right now. So normally for nostrils, you'll just sort of grab, like the faces on the side of the nose. I feel like this one's like, as far as things go, pretty self-explanatory, and sort of drag them out. And now he has awkward nostrils, but nostrils nonetheless. And you can see, so like there is a little 6-pointed star, 6-pointed, 1, 2, 3, yeah, so there's a 6-pointed star here, but it's not, it's like squished behind the nostril, which isn't somewhere that's really presumably going to get a lot of screen space, screen time, or deform all that much, so it's like not a bad place to stash stars if you got them there. And you might notice, oh my god, this is so creepy. Alright, I've decided that his entire nose is like far too far sticking out, so I'm just gonna select it and just be like, no. And then also maybe do that up here. Which again is like normally you would work with like orthographics of the side of the head, but just kind of winging it here. So creepy. Okay. I've given him like the nose of a little girl from the side view. From the front, it's horrifying. And you can just kind of, you know, keep going through and like shaping the nose and like doing better things to it than this. If you throw in like another loop in here, you can get like a little bit more creasing on the nostril if that's something that you need. I really like giant bulbous noses. They're like a super fun thing to do. But you know, I mean, kind of shape this into something a little bit more rational. And then I usually also end up going and like taking these little loops in here and just like crushing them back as well. Because I find like that area does tend to like go in a little bit more than you would expect. Anyway, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time shaping the nose because it's pretty much just shaping a nose, but this is like more or less. And you can just sort of like grab this little guy back here and like squish it in. Alright. I really wanted to like not have paper bag nose. But so you will notice, so like if I, definitely in the smooth model, I mean like unsmooth he still kind of looks like a head. But like if I smooth him, you'll notice that the nose is pulling out a lot, and it's like smoothing pretty horribly down here. So that's just a matter of adding in 1 or 2 more edge loops is really gonna help to fix that. So I'm just gonna, again, go to my insert edge loop tool and be like, voila, edge loop. And you can see that it's pretty much, it's still a weird shape, but it's not pulling anymore. And now I have a little bit more geometry to play with. I can really go in and do something, you know, a little bit less horrendous with the underside of this nose. Same thing here. I'm just gonna maybe expand that a little bit because that's ridiculous looking, and like pull that in. Usually if I'm personally doing organic modeling, I try to keep things like relatively square. I like keep my geometry relatively square because I think it's easier to look at and work with. And it also tends to eliminate issues with stretching. Yes, let me just save this real quick. All right, so then in terms of like the mouth, again, it's just pretty much a matter of like adding a few more edge loops to make this look not completely creepy. So usually when I'm doing stuff, I'll block in, like, again, one edge loop for like the basic outline of the lips, and then like one for just the inside of the mouth. And I'm just going to throw in one more edge loop sort of in here for volume. I will shamelessly drag this out and be like, boom, the lips are finished. Right? Like, this looks great. So again, I'll just drag that out, and then I'll just grab those little like corner pieces and squish them back in. So one thing I have noticed for the corners of the mouth, should you guys ever find yourself making these, it does tend to help to, because you end up with a lot of geometry bunching up in one very small area right here. And I have, like, right now I have 3 loops and they're already clipping through each other, and it's just like kind of horrifying and really hard to deal with. So one thing I've taken to doing, and I found it's made the mouths look a lot nicer, is taking that very inner loop and like really pushing it back into the mouth. Like, it's like really curve that thing in. It gives you a little bit more space to work with so that your loops aren't overlapping. And overall I found it just makes like a much nicer transition into the mouth for some reason. So I'm just gonna kind of like maybe add in 1 or 2 more loops in here to see if I can at least get part of this face looking not completely horrifying. And again, I'm just gonna, you know, kind of grab these faces in here and just kind of work on rounding out the lips and like actually giving it some volume to it so it doesn't look like some horror show thing. But I really, and like, don't be afraid to really push the bottom of the lips out. I found that's like kind of the only way to get a decent curve on them. You know, you can kind of go in like this and maybe from whatever I did originally and kind of pull that back in because that was creepy. That's not what I wanted. Do like, I don't know. I'm just kind of doing stuff to his face. So this is like kind of, I guess, a weird example, but if you wanted to, you could go in and add, one thing I'll kind of do, like when I'm finished with the lips and happy with it, and this is, again, just kind of an aesthetic thing, I'll add one loop kind of closest to them, and that'll help. I mean, you can see it helps define the lower lip like a lot. And it'll also sort of help define that upper lip. In this case, it's a little bit maybe too intense. So I just sort of pull that away from the original lip, or like pull the original lip up slightly. And then I think it's definitely looks weird like on the corner of the mouth, so it might just, I think this actually might be an instance where I need to push this second to last edge loop in slightly. And then that might sort of help with that curvature a little bit. So that's like, you know, I could keep going and shaping that, but that's like more or less how you make lips, more or less. It just needs like much more shaping to not look super trashy. I mean, even theoretically, doing something like this would make it look slightly better. And you can also put in, you know, more or less edge loops in here, depending on what you need. Like, it probably is not a bad idea to have a few more loops in here. It would definitely help define the shape a little bit more, but, oh my. This looks like, one of the characters from Futurama. I'm just like spacing out right now. I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, so any questions on like any of the stuff that I've done so far for the face? All right. In terms of eyes, pretty much doing the same thing as I did for the mouth. So I'm just gonna come in and maybe like shape these little vertices in here a little bit. Actually, no, I'll leave this eye. Like, cool. And then I'm just going to, again, add one more edge loop on the front of his eyeballs. And I'm just going to take that and sort of use it to outline the crease in his eye, like where his eyelid sort of comes up and like makes a wrinkle above your eye. I usually like to outline that area because I feel like that's something that, again, it's a crease in your model, so you need the loops there to actually define it. And it's also just sort of like a logical place, I think, for me personally, at least, to start with things. So like once I have that more or less outlined, kind of where I want it, I guess, I might, I usually end up pushing this a little bit back into the head, if not now, then later. And so now I have, again, something that's vaguely resembling a human face, sort of. The next thing I usually do for eyes is like when they start looking less trashy. And that's just, I will insert an edge loop in here. And again, same thing I did for the lips, where I'll just pull that out and then just grab those two little vertices here and push them back. And this is pretty much just defining like the curvature of the eyelid. So you can see, I mean, now he just looks like an old dude with a huge nose. Wow, that's creepy. But anyway, so once I have like that sort of like over eye shape defined, I'll go in and usually that crease ends up being like a bag under the eye in my personal stuff. So I'll just sort of throw, maybe like fiddle with that and be like, that kind of, I guess, looks like a reasonable shape for an eye bag or something. And again, just kind of like throw this in, I don't know. Where is this? Meh. Holy crap. All right. And then if I add one more loop, the eye is going to start looking much more like an eyeball. So I'm just going to throw a loop pretty much right like above, or like right outside or inside, doesn't really matter, that loop that I just made. And when I do that, it's really starting to like harden out that eye crease that I put in. And in this case, like the bulge in my eye is probably like a little bit excessive, so I'm just going to grab that and like shove that back in. But, you know, I can smooth out some of the area like this. Probably doesn't make sense to have like a super hard crease. Same thing back here. So I usually end up sort of shifting those edge loops apart a little bit. But I mean, like you can see that now it does kind of look like an actual eyeball, or like an eye thing. It doesn't really look anything like a Diego Montoya at this point. It's like just creepy, but that's like more or less modeling a face. And you would just want to go through like for stuff like for the jaw, left view, yeah, we'll take it. Usually these little curves at the bottom of your chin end up sort of defining the overall shape of your chin. So like I'm going to grab these and just sort of shift those out a little bit so that they eventually become something that does actually resemble the vague shape of a chin. So like something like that. And then again, like half of this is literally just going through and being like, well, that looks stupid. Like I'm going to reshape this and just sort of play with things until they look not completely ridiculous, but like now he has something that maybe actually resembles a chin. And then if I threw in like another loop in his mouth, I would have even more control over his chin. So if I take this, drag it out, I'm like, oh my god, that's a chin. But it would also allow me to go in and like crush this little area in here down ever so slightly, and then I could get that little lump right above the lip. That was a bad way to implement that. Yeah, that's questionable looking. But yeah, so I mean, just like kind of keep adding geometry where you need it. Just like mostly pay attention to, again, like the major lines of the face. So like nose, if you have anywhere like this where it's like you're having giant wrinkles or something, that's all stuff that you would want to pay attention to. So I mean, I'm pretty much inclined, because like this is like honestly pretty much the basic shape of the face. Everything else is just me sitting here and like tweaking things until it looks not horrendous. Oh, one thing actually I did really, so the corner of the eyes and the corners of the mouth, you do usually need to add in some more loops in there. And you can see like once I've done that, it helps to actually harden it out and get a sort of crease in there, so it's not like so weirdly soft. So again, like if I do that in the mouth, it'll get a lot creasier looking, but it also gives me a little bit more geometry like towards the back of the head that I can fiddle around with, in terms of like shaping his cheeks and stuff like that. That was really creepy. Not making it better. But yeah, so most of this is honestly, again, just sort of fiddling with things until they do something kind of like what you want them to do. But again, oh god. Creepy. So that is more or less just like, again, super basics of like how to model a very creepy head. I did have people express interest in doing like a body. Would you guys be interested in seeing just like brief block in of like a human body? Cool. Alright, so I'm just going to keep working in this file, and I am shamelessly not going to look up reference for a body. This is going to be really weird. In case this wasn't weird enough. Alright, so I got my cube. I'm going to zero it out because I just like it to be symmetrical, and I'm going to start with one subdiv on each side. Pretty much the same thing I started with for a head. 2 subdivisions on each side. Cool. Pretty much, again, same thing I started with for a head, more or less. And then, this is the bit where it gets weird when I start, like, Googling, wait, that's not what I meant. Human figure. So, like, if you take organic modeling with Moriello, like, literally half that class is just, going in. There's a specific one that I was looking for. I can't find it now. Okay. Don't ask. It'll make sense in a sec. But like half of that is just studying like musculature and stuff and like how muscles work, which is actually really interesting. Because like when you're modeling stuff like this, you want to use your topology to help define, you know, areas of change or like creases in the body, and like a lot of times muscles are part of that. It's also cool to just learn about how the human body works. But in this case, so, all right, I'm gonna start with a cube. And where am I going? I want my front view. It looks like he's being strangled by Fezzik here. And I'm just gonna hide my image planes because that's not particularly useful right now, and my grid. All right, so I'm just gonna scale this up a little bit, and pretty much do, again, this same thing that I did to my head, where I'm just gonna grab these faces here and make everything slightly more cylindrical. And also, I don't know how exactly that got so huge, but it's stupid. So the first thing I'm going to do is add in a loop that's going to define more or less where the bottom of like the pectorals would be. It's like, say that's here. Again, I'm not using like actual reference for things. And then the end goal, if you want an animatable figure, if you don't, you just need something that like looks like a cool muscly dude, like whatever. Just do whatever and throw it in a ZBrush and sculpt it to be whatever you need. If you want it to animate, the goal is to basically have the pectoral and the shoulder be their own little patch of geometry, so that because if you've ever looked, like when you raise your shoulder, it sort of like pulls a little bit of the skin from your chest up with it. So if your character raises its shoulder, it's going to stretch the geometry from the pectorals up with that shoulder. So you kind of want to try to define that with geometry a little bit. And to do that, I'm just going to, I usually end up throwing in like 1 or 2 extra edge loops just for grins. I think it makes kind of things easier. So I'm going to say, here is my shoulder patch. Like if I were to extrude arms out of this, you could. But in this case, I'm just going to rotate it slightly and squish it down a little bit like this. And again, I don't pretend this is like the most gorgeous model that you're ever going to see. But, so when you're looking at this, basically, if I select this loop of faces, you can see that it's sort of very, very roughly highlighting the like where like the pecs and the top of the shoulders and like kind of going on the back of your shoulder blades. It's kind of highlighting like where that would be. So you know, I don't know. I'm not going to make this like super pretty. It's probably going to be like a really ugly body, but you'll be able to recognize like certain patches of muscles. So what I'm going to do is throw in one more edge loop, and that's pretty much going to be, imagine this is like the border between your pectorals or like right where your sternum would be. That's kind of like what you're outlining with this loop, or like also your spinal cord if you're looking at the back of the figure. So at this point I'm going to grab these faces. So again, this is pretty much like loops over shoulder, shoulder blades, and pectorals. And I'm just going to take those and extrude them and do something like this. Kind of cool. And you can see, like, if I smooth that, they don't look particularly well formed, but you can see something that kind of maybe vaguely, very vaguely resembles muscles. The goal being to have, like, if I, you know, click on this edge loop, it would give me basically one loop that runs around my entire figure like this. So, like, pretty much tracing around the pec, the top of the shoulder, and then the shoulder blade in the back. And that's more or less like the base of any human chest you would make. And then again, you can always go back and shape stuff so it looks less trashy, but yeah. Every time I say meh, and then I go back and like keep fiddling with stuff. All right, so the next thing that next thing that I at least usually work on is the abs. So I'm just gonna kind of lazily take this edge loop and be like, cool. So this is basically the same thing, like where I made, think of this a little bit as like the eye patch that we made for the head. And then this is like that little dividing line between the nose and the mouth. Because the abs are pretty much made the exact same way that you make the mouth. So first of all, I'm actually just going to grab some of these and shift them in slightly so that maybe this sort of looks more humanish, maybe. But I'm basically gonna also use this edge loop to sort of trace around where, like, the very rough shape of the rib cage. Buttons. Alright, so we have like a very, very ugly looking sort of little rib cage, but like, can you see how it's sort of like, you know, kind of ribby shaped? So again, there's like any major features of your body that you need, you should really have if you have geometry that sort of follows that curvature. And then for abs, it's literally like the most unartful possible thing ever. I am literally just going to take these faces and extrude them in and be like, abs. Great. I'm not pretending this looks, you know, fantastic, but a girl can dream. No. Anyway, but this is like, again, pretty much is how you make abs. You would just need more loops. Like if you wanted to have like a six-pack on this character, you would just need more geometry in here to actually define said six-pack. And then for legs, so legs are like, honestly, even more unartful than anything else. I'm just going to chop out pretty much holes for the legs on the side of this person. And then by the time I'm done with it, it's actually going to end up looking more or less like a, what the heck? Like a one-piece women's swimsuit on the bottom is like pretty much what you usually start with before you actually put in legs. So I'm just kind of doing something like this and like pulling the legs up on the sides. Again, it looks like super ridiculous, but it'll get better, I swear. Alright, so this is like more or less what you would, again, have before you actually put in legs. Huzzah. And again, so usually I'll just sort of go through and like do my best to sort of keep things roundish, like not completely ridiculous looking, before I go in and like add a bunch of geometry, because the more geometry you have, the more you need to like manually push around, and it just sort of takes longer to edit. But again, personal preference. So I have my holes for my legs. What if I want holes for some arms? There's like a bunch of different ways you can do arm stuff. Like if you take Moriello for organic modeling, he does like this crazy stuff where you add like geometry for musculature and all that stuff, which is awesome. Not doing that right now. So I'm just going to semi-lazily multi-cut a line across here for two reasons. So one, it gives me a convenient place to throw an armhole. And secondly, I'm not so much a fan of, like, before I put that loop in, I had this giant, super stretched out quad, which is, like, kind of awful. So I throw this loop in. And then I'm just going to, tries aren't gonna kill anything, but like, So I'm just gonna throw in another edge loop and basically take these arms, and then you can just sort of extrude them out. And now you have, like, super awkward arms. And this, for the most part, like, should deform reasonably well. I mean, this is, like, a little bit awkward in here, what I've done, but every time I do this without looking at reference, it ends up slightly different. So one thing that actually might... I'm just gonna leave it for now. Alright, so here we have something that, again, kind of resembles arms. You know, I could go in and, like, clean up some of the stuff in here if I wanted to. I'm just... No, I do want to, because that's really ugly. Alright, so I'm looking at this, like, if I smooth this, I'm kind of like... I'm thinking about how arms move when they deform, and I'm like, this is weird. Like, this quad in here is kind of weird. Like, it's not going anywhere, it just sort of stops, and it'll probably cause issues if I'm animating. So what I'm going to do is I've decided to pretty much trace this up this way, and just continue that into the upper part of the arm. So basically just going to go into my multi-cut tool and be like, aha, ha, ha, ha. Okay, that's a weird... This is a strange decision I've made. And just sort of very grossly throw that in there. So I do end up with a try when I do that. Theoretically, I should be able to go in and just, like, merge these guys to center. And I think, honestly, I'd rather have the try here than that, like, that weird topology thing that I had before. Because at least now I do have one loop that's running pretty much the entire way around the arm. Where it's like tracing the arm rather than having like that weird thing where it's sort of like poked out and stopped. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain like why that would cause issues, but like it probably would cause issues. But anyway. So for the arms, again, more or less the same thing again, like if you want to make, you know, something like an elbow shape, I'm just gonna throw this out and say, cool, here's where my elbow is. And extrude that and be like, here, what are you doing, Maya? Alright. And be like, here's my elbow. This looks like a human being, right? Yeah. Anywho. So, just as a really hacky, weird example. So if I were to, basically, I'm gonna make a fake crappy rig. I'm just going to shift the pivot up towards where the elbow is. And if I go to bend this arm, you can see that nothing good happens when I do this. And this is pretty much, I just need more edge loops in here to actually define the curvature of this elbow area. So again, I'm pretty sure I've said this like 3 or 4 times at this point, but for curves and stuff, even in your organic models, you do still want 3 edge loops defining them. And they can be, like, not as rigid as they are on hard models, but, like, again, usually 3 edge loops is sort of like what you'd shoot for. So I'm just going to do something like this, and then maybe just sort of add, like, a weird, very awkward little extruded elbow patch in here. Nothing particularly good at all. Here's my very awkward elbow. However, if I'm going to select these pretty much same places as before, turn on soft select, more or less like this, and then just, again, shift the pivot to the center of the elbow. Theoretically, when I bend this, alright, I think my soft select's a little bit off. Alright. So if I soft select and drag this, you can see that the arm bends a whole crap ton of a lot better than it did before. It actually isn't like collapsing. It's clipping itself a little bit, but it's not like crushing itself into oblivion. It's actually not a horrible bend. This is so uncomfortable. Dear God. Anyway, So again, this is more or less like how you would make the bend in an arm. Or like any major joint in the body, again, 3 edge loops is going to give you like a nice crease, and this also goes for the same thing for like the knees. Any questions on that? All right. And again, I'm just going to leave this super creepy for now because right now it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go through and throw in some super quickie legs. And I'll just be like, hey, legs. Amazing. So usually for legs, I'll end up doing something sort of like this, and then just sort of extruding down again and being like, cool, here's some knees, and cool, here are some skinnier ankles. Really quick, if you guys are ever made those ankles like super tiny. If you guys are ever making feet, and this goes especially if you're taking Moriello's class, like if you do this, he will find you and harass you about it. If you guys are ever making feet, what you don't want to do is take this and like extrude this down and basically make what he calls sock feet, where it's just sort of like a weird curvature like this, and then you sort of eventually end up with like a foot. This is like the least ideal way to make feet ever. It doesn't deform super nicely, and I'm talking mostly for like modeling for animation, not specifically just how to model a foot. So you'll notice like if I click on this edge loop, it runs pretty much all the way up the guy's body, and then instead of, ideally it would stop on the floor, but here it's sort of continuing out his foot. And it's kind of hard to explain why this is like a bad way to model feet, but it is a really gross way to model feet. The better, and in my opinion, it's honestly easier to model feet like this. But the, I guess, better solution would be to extrude down, be like, all right, if this is my ankle, this is the bottom of my foot, and then just come in and grab the faces on the front of the foot here, and extrude them out, and just, oh my god. And then just drag them out. And now you have more or less instant feet, sort of. And I mean, this right now looks completely ridiculous. But this is going to deform a lot better if you need to animate it. If you need to go in, you can go in and add like one edge loop above the ankle, and like one on the foot here, and that's going to give you a really nice curvature on your ankle, I guess. Obviously, you know. So I'm just going to be really lazy and just close this with, close this with a giant star, but like, ideally you would go through and close it with like real person quads. Or just don't delete, if you just don't delete the faces at the bottom of the legs, it pretty much fixes this issue. For some reason, I'm just hardwired to delete those faces. But this is, again, the ideal way to do feet. So if I'll click on this edge loop, see it's running all the way up, and then it pretty much stops at the ground. Doing this is, again, just going to make it a lot easier if you need to animate this character. If you don't, kind of doesn't matter as much. And then same thing as for the knees as I did for the elbow, where I just need 3 little loops in there to help define the shape of the knee. So if I'm doing a game character, a lot of times I will, like, this will pretty much be like the leg that I do. I mean, apart from the fact that it's messed up and going into the other symmetry, like, this is, you can get away with this as a knee and like it will deform properly. And it also gives like a little calf definition, like it's pretty much the lowest poly knee you can make and still have like 3 edge loops in it. But yeah. So, any questions? Oh my god. And for the record, I would just like to say that this is actually better than the one I made for my last class. Shaping bodies is like a whole thing. I find faces easier than bodies, honestly, but this is like more or less something kind of like what you'd want if you wanted like an animatable body. And then, you know, obviously you could go in and like put, you know, a neck on this person and just grab like some of these faces and just sort of extrude up and be like, hey, oh my god, Maya, what is wrong with you today? And be like, hey, I have a neck now. Oh, that's not better at all. Everything I do just makes us more uncomfortable. How would you guys feel if I 3D printed this 7 feet tall and just had it sitting somewhere in this room for finals?
I would love that. I probably want to take it home and change it.
Yeah. No, I'm 100% not doing that because it's a colossal waste of plastic. But if I actually taught you guys on Halloween, I would shamelessly 3D print that and wear it as a mask, which I actually did.
Size?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Of course. No, I actually did that. If there's time at the end of class and you guys want to hang around, I'll show it to you. But I did a creepy mask and I came in with it. I basically did a mask of my own face and oil painted it, and my students came in and they're like, oh my god! It was really creepy. It looked like a murder mask. Anyway. Alright, so that's pretty much the very basics of modeling a very creepy body. Oh, one thing, feel free to laugh as much as you want, whatever. I didn't think about this when I was like, hey, I'll do a full human figure. There is a good way and an awkward way to model a butt. The awkward way to do it is to just sort of take it and like extrude it outwards. What are you doing, extrude tool? It doesn't look terribly great. And it's just, again, it's one of those things where like you can make it work shape-wise. It's just like there's a topology-wise, there's a better way to do it if you're animating your character. If not, by all means, go ahead and extrude yourself, you know, butts if you want. I don't really care. I'm just talking for animation. So, if we just undo that monstrosity, I'm just going to go through and do a little bit more shaping on the backside of this guy. So I'm going to run through and, again with my insert edge loop tool, I'm going to throw in a loop here, and I've officially destroyed symmetry on this. Ha ha ha. Basically what I'm going to do is just grab this and shove it aggressively outwards. The more loops I add, the more this is like going to actually make sense and like look less ridiculous. So I'm going to throw in maybe another loop, and you know, just kind of keep blocking it in. Usually you also need to add some more loops like on the inside of the legs, because there's like not enough resolution to like actually do what you need. And it's also really like, no. I always find it awkward to like navigate the camera to like just work on this, but basically, again, you just sort of want to like keep shaping things like this. But it's usually a good idea, again, to sort of do things with, what am I trying to say? Single loops of edges, if that makes sense. So, I mean, obviously this looks ridiculous the way it is right now, but if you do it like this, you have the geometry in here to sort of control whatever the shape like under the leg is doing. And you just have like, again, more geometry to sort of define how this curve works. Which is good because, you know, if you think of doing a split or like bending your leg straight out to the side, if you look at like where the crease in your skin is when you do that, having the geometry like this is going to help to, you know, make that crease in your actual model, if that makes sense. Whole thing with like 3 edge loops for everything. But yeah, so I mean, this is, again, with more edge loops is obviously preferable. But this is like more or less how you would make the better way to make a butt. And I'm actually just going to, I would like this guy to be semi-symmetrical. Oh god, I've deleted like half of his body. When did I do that? Whatever. When you just don't care. Alright, so I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to scale this to -x. I'm going to mesh combine these dudes. Somehow that hasn't broken my normals, which makes me suspicious, and I'm going to run with it for now. And then I'm just going to edit mesh and merge to connect all of the little pieces on his back together. And this is for some reason really bothering me, so I'm actually going to close this hole, because also like 2 appends will pretty much fix it. Alright, So, we have this super creepy dude. Would you next like to do a quick thing about like rigging and how to pose this monstrosity, or do wander off to weapons and then like come back to rigging?
See what?
Sweet.